So here we go. We're recording.
Oh my God!
All the TJ love.
We're recording, and I have to go charge my phone. So I have to go sit.
Welcome, everybody.
Why am I so dark?
Okay, well, this is the start of your show, guys.
Yeah, this is the start of our show.
Welcome to the AIH Superfans.
Welcome to the 21st episode, the second episode of our blab. And there's 172 likes for Alan. So he's off to a good start tonight. So I'm gonna start.
Those are all from Arby.
I'm gonna start off by saying that you guys weren't a part of this. We started recording without you, but then we had some difficulties. But two things happened this weekend, or the last couple of 48 hours, that I didn't think were gonna happen. One of them was the Broncos winning the Super Bowl, and that Chevy would actually do something. That was the other one. So, Ryan, I want to ask you, what did Chevy do today?
Something good.
What was that? What did you do?
That was my that was my tweet from earlier. He did something good. He signed Big Buff to.
It's a sock.
If it was a tie, that would be epic.
Yeah. So what was the deal? I only saw kind of I didn't see everything. I know some of it, but
5 years,
38,
7.6, so
38.
Right?
It's $8 million for the first 4 years and $6 million for the last year.
So what,
yeah. So yeah, it's
what are your thoughts on it?
The term is great. I thought that he probably could have got more term had he gone to the to July 1st. He wanted to stay, and that's very good for Winnipeg, and it's good for the Jets. 7.6 is a lot of money, and it will be a lot for a 35-year-old Dustin Byfuglien. But yeah, you can't argue with the term. They got an all-star to stay in Winnipeg. The only issue is that it's still status quo. I mean, the only free agents were Buff, Ladd, and Party, and we just brought one of them back. So everyone else is still under contract for next year. So some changes are needed, but that has nothing to do with Buff. So I got no issues with that deal.
What do you think, Alan? What are your thoughts?
I think word Pappy going is, what's that picture in the background in his room there? I don't know.
Do I want to know?
It's a zebra. I have a zebra print from Yisk on my wall. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. And look at it. Dream. It's a crooked dream. It's corny. I know.
All right.
It's okay. Anyways,
I think it's a good deal. I think that 5 years is nice term. I think we were all dreading 6 or more, so it was under 6, which is nice. I think that a 35-year-old Dustin Byfuglien is still going to be an asset, and with the last year at $6 million, you can keep that, or I think that someone will take that contract if you're in a position where you're still having to move an asset. I think that 35 years old, I don't think that he's going to be in a steep decline at that point in time. And 7.6, I mean, this is the face of your franchise. This is your superstar. On a team that doesn't have a lot of marketable faces outside of the city of Winnipeg. I know on 20416, everybody we speak with is Byfuglien. That's what they know about the Jets, is Dustin Byfuglien. He's arguably a top 5 defenseman in the league, probably a top 10, pretty clearly. Brian, I don't know if you agree. I see you smirking. We're all on camera. But I think that he's an all-star for the team. It's we can get into what has to be done now. We take care of a big piece, but we've got other things to deal with still that have an immediate need, and there's going to have to be some decisions made on how you spend those dollars on your blue line, because you've got a big contract in the works for Jacob Trouba, and True North still has to decide. They've opened the wallet for Dustin Byfuglien, but I don't think that there's still a lot of dollars that they want to spread around. So see what happens now.
Yeah, and I just to touch on that real quick, I tweeted this earlier with Bufflin, Myers, Toby, and Stu North. That's $22 million for 4 guys on your blue line, cap-wise, with Trouba still to go. So if he gets 6, do you really want to spend, like, by the time you add him and someone else, you're looking at 28, 29 against the cap for a blue line that's pretty average. I mean, they can't keep the puck out of their net even with a good goalie in Connor Hellebuck right now. So
to be fair, those numbers, like losing, keeping the puck out of the net, we're pretty good. We're in the top half 5-on-5, right? Like if we're looking at underlying numbers, 5-on-5, this is a decent team, right?
Yeah.
We're being scored on. We're being scored on at will on the penalty kill, and I think that's a factor too. As far as the deal's concerned, 7.6 for Buff at 5 years is perfect. I think we knew that we'd have to overpay a little bit or give up a little bit on dollar wise to get him at the term that we needed to. But we offered 3. While he wanted 7, they figured it out and signed him for 5, which is excellent for what he's at right now. And I heard on the radio today too, like Lawless was talking about it. Comparing to the big defensemen out there, the really big impact defensemen over the years, Chris Pronger, Larry Robinson, all these big guys that were a big physical presence towards the end of their careers, in the last half of their careers, they changed the way that they played the game, and Bufflin's not near that point yet. Bufflin isn't changing who he is yet, or he's just rounding into form, really. We haven't really seen Bufflin the first 3 years that the Jets were here. Bufflin wasn't the physical presence that he was last year. Like, if you look back, Bufflin really flipped a switch at the beginning of last year, or when, the switch was flipped when he was put back on D. That physical presence really wasn't there in the first 3 years. Not that I can recollect anyways. When do you remember Bufflin laying down a big, massive hit or being the physical presence that he was last year? I think that's something that he developed, and he actually upped his game at last year, being that physical presence. And I think that's what made him an X factor last year. But you know what? He hasn't changed the way that he's played. And I think we have at least a good 3 solid years of him playing at this level.
What I find interesting about this deal, though, is that he's got a no movement clause for only 2 years. So really,
well, it's modified.
Well, it's modified, but at the same time, it gives the Jets some flexibility. Is what if he, like, let's say he drops off the face of the earth and he cannot play anymore after the 3rd year, it gives them some flexibility. Because he doesn't have that no movement clause, right?
Yeah, but if he drops off the face of the earth, who wants him?
Well, still, but you can move him down into the HL.
They're not carrying that contract. There's no way.
But here's the thing: if you're not trading that contract, Ryan, if it's untradeable, we all know the Jets are in the bottom half of the league in spending, and they've got. If you're thinking down the road, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, they've got a ton of guys on entry-level deals. They're going to need that contract to get them to the floor. It's a possibility, right? It's a real possibility that they might need that contract in 3 or 4 years to get them to the floor.
They're not,
or they leave them unprotected for the expansion draft.
I don't think either of those things are going to happen. I think you're dreaming if you're thinking both of those scenarios are going to happen. At $7.6 million, Bufflin isn't going to go from the face of the Winnipeg Jets to someone we want to bury on the Moose or give up on waivers.
He becomes the face of the Manitoba Moose.
That's Stu. Let's
say worst case scenario is what? Let's say that Buff declines in late year 3, early year 4. You only have to eat this contract for a year and a half after that. It's a 5-year deal. It's pretty damn nice. Like 6, 7, 8. Now you're talking about, potentially 4 years of eating shit on a big contract. In this case, if the wheels completely fall off, maybe you've got 2. Maybe. But I just don't think
I can't see it being an albatross at all. Like really, like
No,
if we're holding on to Mark Stewart and Chris Thorburn to expiration, like I know there's $7.6 million, but Dustin Bufflin's not going to drop off. Like if he plays at half speed of what he is right now, he's still better than. Well, I'm not even going to say it, but you understand what I'm saying.
Better than Mark
this
Stewart?
contract isn't. Who's that?
Better, he's better than Stu North.
One thing that I do find funny, and I mean because I got to get my jabs in at the organization as much as I can, right? We went from Bufflin not even being good enough to play defense with this team, to a $7.6 million player, like a $38 million contract, and he was moved back like what, a year and 2 months ago.
When 4 guys were injured, the top 4 were all out.
I think some realization came to the Jets that we can't lose him because there is nothing in this organization outside of like Trouba. Like there is nothing in the pipeline. Like we don't even know. Like to sit there and say, can Morrissey and Trouba or Myers do what Bufflin does? No, they can't. And outside of those guys, they have nothing. So it's either sign Ladd, who is replaceable, like Ehlers can replace him. If they get Austin Matthews will produce at a rate that Ladd has. But if they lose Buff, if you lose Buff, what replaces him? Because there's no one on this team that can replace him. And that's where I think Chevy came to the realization that, holy shit, in the next 3 to 5 years, we have nothing coming up into the organization.
Well, I had to laugh. I mean, first of all, when talking about Trouba, where does he fit in this anymore? I mean, it makes you wonder what his future is, simply because there's so much money tied up now. And I mean, Stuba is already back together. They're playing Trouba.
Yeah, well, what does Stewart have left on his? What does Stewart have left after
2 years after this? 2.6.
Right.
They signed him for 4.
So if we're looking at salaries right now, we had what, 12 million to the cap? What was the number?
What do you mean?
We're closer to.
Aren't they at like 50,
who has?
Aren't they at 59 million and the cap's what, 72?
Yeah, they're way under the cap. We were breaking down the number.
Yeah, so Bufflin's contract only adds effectively $2 million to the cap hit, right? So we still have about $10 million to go, right? So
yeah, but they're not gonna pay to the cap.
We broke down.
Well, but who knows? The cap's gonna move too. Who knows? You know, what was Chevy's quote today? We have to project where the cap's going to be and where internally where we're going to be at and whatever it is.
Was like this big.
We're at the bottom. And if let's just say conservatively we go to where Chipman says we're going to be in the middle of the pack, right? We're not going to be at the cap and we're not going to be at the floor. At the beginning of the year, that's what he said, right? We've got about 6 or 7 million to get there. We have 6 or 7 million to get there. AAV. Right. There's some contracts here. There's some contracts here that perceivably could be moved, right? Like Enstrom. What are the plans for Enstrom?
Well, beside his no move clause.
Yeah.
He's got 1 year left after this year, right?
And a full no move.
When is Enstrom expires?
I'll pull it up.
Allen can,
2017.
Yeah. He doesn't have to go anywhere if he doesn't want to, and he likes it here. So
here's what we have. We have Tobias Enstrom. He will be a UFA in 2 more years. He's got 2 years after this at 5.75. Tyler Myers is on the books for another 3. Bufflin's on the books for another 5. Stewart is on the books for 2 more.
Due north.
So yeah, I mean the defense, assuming that they either sign Trouba or Trouba gets moved, or maybe Enstrom gets moved for somebody that has a couple of years on their contract, this is your decor for at least 2 more seasons, right?
I know, and that's like that's what scares me is that it's the status quo. And to Poppy's point earlier, yes, this team is good 5-on-5, but they've shown for a couple of years now that they're terrible at special teams. But it's the same people. Like, where's the improvement going to come from?
So, we've all frozen. If all we. So, which
it's not a glitch.
Interesting though, Poppy, you tweeted me today saying that there was who was it on the Big Show this morning? Poppy it's crazy that the Winnipeg Jets are like one of the only teams that has the same like core roster as they did. What was it like?
Well, the direct quote is there's 9 players on the Jets that were with the Atlanta Thrashers when they first came here. Now, if a tracksuit doesn't get wet, that number effectively is 11. But the quote was, how many teams in the whole league have 9 players from 6 years ago on their roster?
Let alone a team that's never won a playoff game.
That's made the playoff once and has won 0 playoff games in their existence, dating back to before they moved here when they were the Atlanta Thrashers. So that's where I'm coming from. Like, there's a misnomer, or there's a sentiment here that I don't think that we're developing our youth to the fullest, or we're not good at developing our youth. I'm not saying that. I never said once, and I never said ever that we're not developing our prospects, but to say that we're just drafting and developing as a strategy, as a franchise, to just draft and develop and not supplement our roster with NHL level talent, I think that's Florida, especially coming off a year where we made it into the playoffs. You know, drafting and developing, and I know TJ and I went at it quite a bit on Twitter like a couple hours ago. Everybody drafts and develops. To have that as your only strategy is kind of foolish. Like, you brought up Washington, for example. Yeah, Washington has a lot of homegrown talent, but they have a couple pieces on there that they've signed or they've traded for. Like Williams and Oshie come to mind automatically, of guys that fill out that roster nicely and put them at the top of the league. But you know what? They had a really, really, I'd say he's a pretty good centerpiece to build your franchise around in Ovi, right? Like, we're never going to get that centerpiece with the core that we have. We don't have it right now. Obviously, with the 9 guys that we have from the Thrashers, you know, Scheifele, yeah, he's rounding out to be a nice piece, but he's never going to be your number one center. Trouba, yeah, he's going to be a good, solid NHL player, but neither of those 2 guys are franchise guys that you could build around. And how are you going to get a franchise guy? Okay, I get it. We're not going to sell the farm to bring in talent. I get that. But how are you going to get that if you're drafting 7th or later in every draft?
That's right.
The frustration is now, okay, so as a fan, you're kind of conflicted. I want this team to do well. I want this team to look good. I want this team to put in an effort. That's all that I've wanted all year, right? But now at this point, where we're 5th last in the league, now to turn it on and win, you know, most of your games and finish in the middle somewhere, not even in the middle in the bottom third, but in the middle of the pack, what is that going to do for this franchise? It's not going to give us a generational player. You know, the top 5 draft picks in this draft coming up are studs. They're all studs. Yep. You know, and the chance of any of those picks being good or making an impact immediately in the next few years is very good, right? So
I still think that we're closer than some people want to believe. I think it's a matter of, I think you could make a couple of the right moves, and again, maybe the moves crash in on you, but I don't think that we're that far off. I mean, again, the Buffalo Sabres, they're a last place team in the league, but they were a terrible team last year. And they've stepped in this year with a vastly improved squad who is moving forward at this point. We have a better core of players than what they had. And we're in a position right now to do a lot of very similar things to what they did. We can get a top 5 pick. We can probably get us another second first round pick for Andrew Ladd. You probably do need to shake up your blue line. In the end, you probably do move one of Trouba or Enstrom. You've got Nick Ehlers, who looks pretty damn good, especially in the last month. You've got to have some faith in some of your prospects because you do have a decent prospect.
Absolutely. And
there are guys out there, right?
Our
prospects, we joke about they're not as good as everybody expected, but they're not as good a crop of 18 and 19-year-olds as we expected. Right?
Oh. And you know what? We can't totally judge them by what's happening in the AHL because we have key prospects that are still in college, right? That are still in college and playing in the NCAA. We can't really judge them based solely on what's happening with the Moose. But my problem is this. Last year, just before the deadline, we deemed ourselves good enough to buy, right? We told our core, and everybody was applauding what Chevy did because, hey, we're telling our core, yes, you're good enough, and we're going to compete. Let's do it. But you do the complete opposite in the off season. You say, screw it. I'm not going to spend the $850 for and I know Stemniak's not going to bring you the cup, but Stemniak's going to make you a lot more competitive and round out your forward lineup a lot more than the guys that you're going to put in, the untested, unproven guys that you're just giving spots to. So why do we send that message at the deadline last year?
Yeah, but you don't have to
flip a switch in the offseason this year.
At this point in time, though, you don't have to sit here and lament over what happened last year. You could look at it and you can say, you know what, Chevy bet on the youngsters, and he lost the bet this season. And now let's accept it because we're in February. Let's deem ourselves sellers and let's do something about it.
Time will tell.
You lost a season, and but you can get something out of it if you play your cards right. If Chevy, right now I wouldn't care about all these losses if the Buff and Ladd situations were handled. One of them has been handled. If we handle the other one, and hopefully we handle it in moving him for something, this team is, maybe we move Hellebuck back down to the Moose when Pavlik comes back. All of a sudden, I think you're in the hunt for that bottom five. And
we're already there.
We're already
we're 2
there.
points out.
And this year, even if you're, if you are the last place team, all that gets you is a 20% chance. So, for a couple of percentage difference, honestly, if we're fourth to last, we're in as good a spot as any because we're guaranteed.
Hey, fourth to last will get us a more talent or a better lottery ticket than drafting 10th, 12th, or 13th, right? And I tweeted this out a couple weeks ago. Finishing ninth in the Western Conference. The difference between finishing ninth in the Western Conference and last in the league, the only difference is you get a shittier pick. Like, you're still not in the playoffs. Like,
yep.
All you do is you have less of a chance. Your lottery pick, or you don't have as many lottery tickets with a 10th pick in the draft. If you have the third pick, then the percentages of that player finding out are a lot greater. And yes, TJ, you can find talent in the later rounds. It's obvious, but you can't tell me that picking 8 guys from 10 to 15 is gonna net you a better chance of getting a generational player than picking in the top 3 once.
Generally racial player?
Well, you're generally racial. Like you're generally Caucasian, right? Like,
all right, so I just got to say a couple quick things before I got to run. The reason I was so high on the tank earlier was because I wasn't sure that Chevy would let it get this far before acting. And we call him Mr. Dithers, and he always seems to procrastinate until the last minute. The fact that 3 weeks before the trade deadline, Buff gets signed and Ladd is still in the air. My worst concern was getting to the deadline with both of them unsigned and Chevy humming and hawing about, do we go for it, do we not? So my concern was, being out of it. And then if we're that low, we may as well improve our chances at Austin Matthews or the Finns So yeah, it's only 20% chance when you finish last, but I just wanted to be in a position, or Chevy be in a position where he could just act. Like, no dithering, no humming and hawing. We're out. Let's trade one of them or both. The fact that he signed Buff to this great deal is awesome. And yes, you can get good players like Ehlers or Connor later in the draft. But you look at your Ovechkins and your Crosbys and your Taves and your Kane and your Ekblads, your Landeskog's. Like, the best young players in the league, or the current best players, mostly are from the top 3 of the draft. And that's not by accident.
The ones that you build your franchise around anyways, right?
Right. Yes, you can get a Getzlaf and a Perry late in a stacked draft. Yes, you can get your Shea Webbers and your Duncan Keiths in the late first, early second. But that's the exception to the rule. Look at the superstars. They're all top draft picks. That's not by accident. McDavid's a stud at 18, right? Like, I don't think that this franchise can acquire top talent through the draft. Or I misspoke, through free agency. Maybe Buff staying will help that, because he's going to sell Winnipeg on the fact that he chose here. And I think he gave up some term and maybe a bit of money.
We can get there too, right? We can get to be a destination too. All we have to do is create a winning culture.
And you have to win.
Yeah.
But winning has to matter. And they showed it for a couple of weeks last year when they went for it, but then they undid that good this summer. So
look at Detroit. Detroit's an armpit, right?
Yeah, it is.
Then they drafted Steve Yzerman, and
but they also lucked out in with Zetterberg and Datsuk. They found the inefficiency in the draft.
Even before they were
but Detroit.
They started.
I wouldn't use Detroit as my argument for that, because they've been the exception to that rule for 20 years.
Yeah. Yes. So Chevy has an opportunity here to move Ladd, move a player or two under contract, reset a little bit, because the status quo is unacceptable as far as I'm concerned.
And my thing is, as much as Chevy, we rag on Chevy and we complain about his inactivity. It was like we complain about how he's operating this team. If he can somehow turn it around, if he can move Ladd for some good, draft picks or even some live prospects or whatever it is, if he can move his contract and make some moves this offseason and draft high. I mean, there's redemption. It's a what have you done for me lately type of thing. Sports is what have you done for me lately. Right?
Yep. I'm looking for any reason to cheer for Kevin Cheveldayoff. I've been positive on a lot of the positive moves. I've just haven't seen as many as other have. I'm giving him major credit for the Buff deal. I'm still a little concerned about him at 35, 36, but I think the deal had to be done, and it's great term. I think he kind of fluked into this tank this year. But if the end result turns into, being forced to move Ladd and reloading with talent and picks, then very good. Like, I want the Jets to win. We all do. And if Chevy can, he can go and totally redeem himself. So that's what I hope for.
Awesome.
All right, but I gotta go. Peace out.
Hey, Ryan's off. Hey, anybody else want to call in?
First one
TJ,
to
get
call
on in. I want TJ to get on this call.
So
TJ, come on.
Yeah.
So you can tell me off.
Yeah, TJ, I want you to tell Pappy off.
In real time. There he is. Let him in.
Yeah. Oh, come on. Where are you? There, look at this.
Hey.
Nice.
Are you ready to school me live?
Oh, you're on. I can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Nope, nothing. Where are you? You got to turn your mic on through the app there. Oh, there. What? Where'd he go?
Now he's audio only. Can say something? Oh, you have no internet.
Okay.
Oh,
so here's something I want to kind of talk to you guys about. I'm not going to say who was talking about it on the radio, but they were talking about the Moose, and they're talking about how lately Josh Morrissey has really found his game because he's playing more physical and he's finishing his check. Do you guys feel like there's a lot of emphasis put on the Jets having to be this rough and tumble physical hockey team that hits hard and is gritty and fights? Or like, because to me it's like Morrissey's not a fighter. Like, he's not a physical guy. They didn't draft him to be a physical guy, but it seems like they could be trying to put him in that role, right? Like trying to square peg round hole kind of thing. Do you guys feel like there's a lot of that narrative around Winnipeg that the Jets have to be just a gritty, hard hitting team? And like, what are your thoughts, kind of?
My thoughts are, this franchise and management know what this fan base is. Like, that's what they want. That's what they want to see. They like to see the physical presence. We like our blue collar hockey players. We like our blue collar everything, right? We like to see guys, rough guys up. That's basically all it is. Like, this management team knows exactly what their fan base is. Like, you go to any Jets game, right? Like, I was the last Jets game that I was at. Who was it? Lowry made a big hit in the offensive zone, and the crowd stands up and cheers. And you know what? The puck's coming the other way. We have no possession. Do they really care? We just made a big hit. Lowry just made a big hit and flattened somebody. Yeah, but that's that's the effect of it, right?
Yeah.
So we need to be physical. Last year we were physical. Our forwards were physical. We were forechecking. We were physical on the forecheck. That type of physicality is effective, right? Standing a guy up in the neutral zone, right? When a play's coming the other way and exposing your defensive partner in an odd man rush the other way, that doesn't make sense. When you flatten a guy who's coming out of their zone and pinch and have an odd man rush the other way, that kind of type of physicality doesn't make sense, right? But everybody sees the big hit and says, yeah, he's such a great guy. But you know what? If we're physical on the forecheck and we're physical that way, and we're heavy in the offensive zone, that makes sense. But having Josh Morrissey become a better prospect or developing because he's more physical on the back end doesn't make sense to me.
Alan,
I have no clue what the narrative is in Winnipeg. I don't listen to anything other than what I see on Twitter.
Why are you even here? You're fucking Torontonian.
I don't listen to anything in Toronto either. I don't give a shit. But I don't think Josh. I would imagine, I haven't seen much about the Moose, but Josh Morrissey isn't turning into a thumper. That's not what he is. As I think that he's more of like an offensive defenseman, right? Like that's what he does, I believe.
Hey, I know TJ couldn't connect because he was afraid of me and didn't want to debate me in real time. So there's an open seat here.
Yeah.
So Harrison, if you want to call, let's do it.
But
you'll smash me.
I don't know if this is necessarily a Winnipeg thing. I still think that there's a lot of old school hockey mentality out there that says you have to be able to crush people to play in the league, and it's nonsense. It's you have to obviously be physically strong to be a professional hockey player, but I would rather have a skill player than a brute on my team.
Yeah, well, even if he gets more physical, I'd much rather have Toby Enstrom on the left side than Josh Morrissey.
But I'm just I remember having a conversation with Pete a while ago, and he was telling me one of the things about the Paul Maurice system is that it's good for a couple of seasons, and then it wears players down, as I think what he said. It's a physical system. And then Bill Waters was talking about it, saying that the Jets, this about 2 weeks ago, the Jets are this physical, hard-hitting, gritty team, and that's great, but it's not really sustainable because eventually it starts to wear some of these guys down. And I'm just wondering, you're seeing a lot of teams getting away from this hard-hitting, gritty hockey, and they're playing a more skilled game, and they're drafting players that aren't big and fast. They're drafting them for being skilled, regardless of how big they are. If they're smaller, they're still drafting them because they're highly skilled players. So I'm just kind of wondering, do you feel like the Jets maybe are stuck in some sort of in the past hockey team, like sense that they're stuck in that rock'em sock'em kind of era, and they're not really adapting to this new kind of highly skilled, hard on the puck, like you're saying, Poppy, where they're hard to get off the puck. Like a player is still very skilled, but they're hard to get like a Detroit. Detroit's not known for being a fighting team, being a hitting team, but they're hard to play against because they're hard to get off the puck. They're just a very highly skilled team. So I'm just wondering maybe if there's a disconnect from where the league is going from where the Jets are going, and maybe is that why the Jets are where they are, is because they got Stu, they got Thor, they got Peluso. Those guys aren't really known for skill.
I don't necessarily think it's the mentality that's the problem. I mean, I don't know why. Again, like maybe that's why they've held on to these three players. But ultimately, again, I really, the frustrating thing with the Jets is that they are in a position where you need to make about 2 or 3 substantial chess moves to really go for it. And if you make the right moves, you could be right in the thick of things with this team in a couple of years. You really, really could. And I think that's ultimately what the problem is on the team. In terms of grit, I mean, whatever reason they're keeping Thorburn and Peluso and Stu, I don't know. There are clearly other options out there. They've chosen to keep these 3 players. Maybe that's living in the past somewhat. Kevin Cheveldayoff was a thumper, right? So maybe that's what he believes a hockey player is all about as well. But I just, even with these 3 guys on the roster, if Stu's on your roster, at this point in time, Stu's probably unmovable. And this team,
you have to divorce them to get rid of them.
Yeah. And this team's not in a position to bury salaries with the Moose. If it's, they're not playing $12 million under the salary cap because they want to have salary cap space. They're playing it there because they don't want to spend the money. So they're not going to bury guys in the Moose and pay that money. Stewart, he makes $2.6 million. And a lot of teams would say, you know what, that's a sunk cost. And we're just going to have to live with it and put him in the press box or elsewhere. The Jets won't do that. The Jets are going to say, if we're spending the money, we're going to use them, even if it doesn't make sense. So I don't know. Maybe when they signed him, they were living in the past, but I think
they were living in the past. They're playing to the market. I'm telling you the truth. You know what? How do you make a statement of living in the He's the face of this franchise.
Maybe
really.
I mean, obviously, I'm living in an idealistic dream world when I say something like this, but I would like to think that based on the overwhelming amount of data that does exist out there, that there's got to be someone that will say, you know what, we can see that Stu is a less than a bottom pairing defenseman. So, can we hear you now?
Hi.
Oh, shit.
I don't know what was wrong with my phone, but it certainly was not working. So,
all right. So I'll just let the two guys at the bottom of this box here
leaving it in the hands of the most handsome. Listen, Roddy, I like you fine. I get where you're coming from, but I just think that you're factually incorrect. And I think that I am correct. So
But draft and develop as a strategy, come on, everybody
you're right.
drafts and develops.
Guys,
If you're better at drafting and developing, then
before you
kudos
get into
to you.
it, the listeners may not have all read this Twitter thing, so tell everybody what your initial positions are before you tear each other's heads off.
Well, I tweeted out that drafting and developing is not a viable strategy because everybody drafts and develops
Correct.
their
And
players.
my position was that Roddy is incorrect. He is correct factually in saying that everybody drafts and develops their players, but I think that when you look at teams that are continually competing and making playoff runs and doing things with a consistent nature, it's the teams that don't have the itchy trigger finger that have gone out and acquired a bunch of draft picks, and then anytime they come close to making the playoffs or anytime they think that they can make a run at the cup, they're going out and then they're making big trades and trading away prospects and future draft picks for Curtis Glencross or Dennis Weidman or Joe Corvo or whoever. But if you stick true to what you believe in and you stay true to your board and you give these guys time to draft and develop in your system, I think that Winnipeg's on the right track. I think that they've found a market and efficiency in the USHL where they continually find these guys, Connor Hellebuck, Kyle Connor, Jack Roslovic, all these guys coming up, Tucker Poolman, who are all putting up insane numbers in junior, in college, what have you. And I think that the window that you guys want, I get it. Everybody wants to win now. But I think that Alan's right. They're not that far off. And if you give these guys 3, 4, 5 years, you're going to see, market improvements on this roster as a whole.
But here's the thing where I think Poppy's coming from is that guys like Little and Wheeler and those guys that are 29, 30 don't have 3 to 5 years. They
Correct.
That win now. Like they are win now. So if those guys are your core and these Connors and these Poolmans and these Roslovics are 3 to 5 years away, why not trade a Wheeler? Why not trade a Little and try to get an asset for him?
That's where I'm. I've never said that we should trade away our prospects to compete now. It's about managing the assets that we have, right? Managing our expiring UFAs. It's managing our lads and Bufflins to the fullest of their capabilities. And to be honest, everything from last off season, like last summer when we did Superfans #1, everybody was totally on this we're signing lad and getting rid of Bufflin thing. I mean, we should have known what we had in a Dustin Bufflin and Andrew Ladd, not even last offseason, but the offseason before. If we're not planning to compete in the next 3 or 4 years, why hang on to these guys so they have no trade value, or where you've got a gun to your head and you're pretty much either you're signing Bufflin or it's going to be a really big failure to the whole fan base.
Well, Bobby, honestly, here's what I will say to that, and I'm gonna go in 2 different directions here. I'm gonna first say that I think you guys are looking at it in a very small vacuum. I think that if you look at free agents that were coming up 2, 3, 4 years ago that weren't restricted, so not your lads, not your Littles, not your Wheelers, not anybody that was in that restricted bubble, there hasn't been anybody of real value. Kyle Wellwood left and went to the KHL. Nick Antropov left and went to the KHL. Tim Stempleton went to the KHL. There was no value for these guys, right? So,
yeah, but then there's this guy Redmond, who obviously had value because he signed a contract, right? Then there's a Michael Frolik that we mismanaged with his last.
I would
RFA
say that
contract.
for sure, absolutely. But here's the thing: is that I think if you're a team like the Florida Panthers, who are right now on the doorstep of going to the Stanley Cup playoffs and maybe competing for an actual championship, there's way more pressure on you to make a deal for a guy like Andrew Ladd than there is Kevin Cheveldayoff to trade him right now. There are going to be suitors tomorrow. There are going to be suitors come Saturday. There are going to be suitors come February 29th that still want this guy. I don't think that there's a timetable. I think that the longer you wait on trading a guy like Andrew Ladd, the more you're going to maximize his value. Billy Beane once said that if you feel that you're in a position where you have to make a trade and that a trade is going to happen, that you've already put yourself behind the 8 ball and you've already lost because you're trying to fit a round peg into a square hole. I don't think that you have to trade Andrew Ladd at this juncture, but I do think that as you get closer to the trade deadline, somebody's going to come calling with an offer that you can't refuse, and then at that time you can pull the lever. But going back to years past, like, did they mismanage Frolik's RFA year and maybe could have signed him a year before? Sure, but when that window passed, Michael Frolik at $4.25 million to play in 2 to 3 to 4 years on your third line isn't a market efficiency. That's the same thing as paying Bufflin to pay, or paying Peluso and Thorburn to play on your fourth line. It's money that's just being eaten up by the guy playing with inferior talent, whether it's Burmistrov and whomever, and a guy that's just getting out there for penalty kill. Well, I'm not paying a guy to do that when I can get Dominic Moore for $1.5 million, $2 million. That'll do the same job. I think that we're just looking at this in a vacuum. I think that we're just looking at everything in individual pieces and being like, well, this was stupid and that was stupid. I think that the grand plan in all of this, I think it was genius. I think it was honestly genius. I think that they saw last year that they were close enough to making a playoff run that they just had to add a Stempniak and a Toulouse. They give up zero, an absolute squidouche in terms of anything of value outside of like a mid-round pick to do that. And this year they were able to fall into a place where they didn't re-sign anybody, they didn't bring anybody back, and now they can finish in that bottom 10 or bottom 5 and compete for the likes of an Austin Matthews, a Matthew Tkachuk, a Pekka Laine, or a.
So you're saying that was.
I'm saying for sure it was by design.
I don't think necessarily that the plan was, well, this will go bad and we will be in this position. But if you look at it, and say, I'm going to get one of these young players. Best case scenario, they slot in nicely and we become, we're still a contending team.
Right.
Worst case scenario, everything goes to shit, and here we are. And it's not a bad position to be in.
It's not a bad year to go to shit, right? Like, I mean, if you're going to go to shit one year, it might as well be when the top 5 are this loaded, top 7, really.
I don't think that Chevy had a genius plan. I'm not giving him that much credit, but
it would have been genius if he didn't commit 4.25.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in a vacuum, right?
4.3 to Stafford,
right? So then he becomes your Andrew Ladd, essentially, in terms of productivity. Andrew's probably still got a little more production under his belt, but at the same time, they're both diminishing assets.
Absolutely.
I don't think it kills you, right? Like you said, there's $11 million of cap space available. I don't think that a move like that kills you. I think that signing a guy to 7, I think that signing Bufflin to 8 years would kill you.
Sorry.
Alan's been trying to say something. So
you're such a troll.
I'm sorry, Alan.
I know. I never get a word in.
TJ's got a lot to say. Trust me. He
I
was schooling me all.
I did not use the word. Sorry, go ahead, Alan.
No, I know. Somebody else did.
Kat, why don't you say something?
I have nothing to say.
We're not talking about the Flyers.
What's Couturier up to right now?
What?
What's John Couturier up to right now?
Oh, no.
Provorov.
We can talk about Ivan Provorov. He was WHL Player of the Week last week, so there's that.
Yeah. So, I don't know.
Yeah, Chevy tried as hell to get him too, right?
Huh?
Chevy tried as hell to get up to draft him too,
Chevy
right?
tried to unload Burmy and a first to go up and draft Provorov, but no one bid on that one. Thank God, because Ron would have had an aneurysm at the draft. Yeah. So you guys are talking about draft picks, and I just want to throw this out there. So the Jets have been back since 2011. And we hear a lot about our lovely friends to the west of us, the Edmonton Oilers, and how outside of the first round, the Oilers cannot do anything. They cannot draft. So I was thinking about it today, and I thought to myself, well, since 2011, how many players outside of the first round have made the Jets roster that aren't goalies? Because goalies, like I have stated many a time, are voodoo. You cannot predict goalies. They are things created out of witchcraft, and you cannot control them. So, realistically, Lowry and Kopp are the only 2 players out of, let's say, 35 that have been drafted since 2011. I'm just saying, going off of 7 You get 7 picks a year times by 5, 35. So the Jets have 5 players on their roster right now, 2 of which have been drafted outside of the first round. So I want to ask your opinions on that. Like, is that really good? Like, is that good?
It's fine.
You guys
it's
think
not
that's
uncommon.
fine?
Yeah.
No, it's not an uncommon number. We did. I'm gonna do a couple of plugs on the AIH 20416 podcast a few weeks ago.
What's that?
We did an interview with Mitch Kasprick of Winnipeg Hockey Talk, and he broke down the 5 drafts that the Jets have been through in pretty grand detail. And I believe particularly there was, I think it's the 2013 draft. I've got it up on my screen now, though it's not isolated for Jets picks. But one of the drafts in particular, like, there's some pretty nice players that are still sitting out there in our system. And again, 5 players. I mean, your first round picks sometimes come into your roster right away. Sometimes they don't. You got Jacob Trouba, who became an NHL defenseman the first or the second year in the league, which is a big deal. Scheifele is your second line center. That's not bad. Lowry could be a third line center. That's pretty good. Ehlers is right there. Ehlers is gonna be a first line player on this team.
He's on the
first
an
line
exciting
of this team next year. He
Oh,
is
yeah.
right now, actually.
Yeah.
But he's going to be
Absolutely.
lights out. But even in, you found Connor Hellebuck. You have a Nick Patan, who again, he's on the Moose, but he's still contributing.
You can't count Hellebuck. Goalies are voodoo.
You still found him. You
Yeah.
know, in 2013, you grabbed Andrew Kopp, who is on this team right now. He was a 4th round pick.
Which I would argue that we're not really
Right. I would agree with that.
on the 4th.
But I mean,
your 3rd round pick, again, goalies are voodoo, but in your 3rd round in round 2, you grabbed Nick Patan and Eric Comrie.
yeah.
I mean,
Where Zach Fucale went 30 picks above him, despite being tremendously worse statistically. So there's that. But I mean, and the guy that you guys aren't even talking about is Moose leading scorer right now in Chase DeLeo, who they got in the 3rd round or what.
Yeah, he's good. Yeah, he's a guy that that's a guy that I'm keeping my eye on for the next couple of years and see how he develops, right? And I've never discounted the fact that our prospects are good. I'm just discounting the fact that the draft and develop is the only thing.
That's not what I said. What I said, Poppy, is that it's a means to an end. Like, here's the thing: if you traded, let's just go back a year. So before you have Connor and Roslovic and all that. If you traded like an Ehlers, there's nothing behind him that gets you excited, that really gets you hard for a prospect, right? Sorry, Al. You like that, Alan?
yeah.
But honestly, like, there's nothing out there that you're like, okay, well, listen, we got rid of a top tier prospect for player X, but at least we still have these guys behind him. Right now, they're just trying to fill those cupboards, and once they get them filled, then yeah, they can go out and trade for a TJ Oshie or Justin Williams or whomever. But I just think that, as currently constructed, they want another 2 to 3 draft classes under their belt before they start parting with guys. To Kat's point, and as a Washington Capitals fan, I have to bring them into the conversation somehow. I'm not worried at all that the Winnipeg Jets aren't developing anything past their first-round picks, because I look at Washington's roster, and outside of Stan Galiev, outside of Holtby, who's voodoo, outside of a couple other guys, they're all first-round picks. Alsner, first-round pick. Carlson, first-round pick. Ovechkin, Backstrom, Kuznetsov, down the list, Johansson. So I think that you see, and I think that Ryan was actually right when he said it before he left, that there is a propensity at the top of the draft. Like, if you get your guy there, you're setting yourselves up for huge success. Now, at the same time, even where the Jets have drafted, be it 11th or 8th or wherever they got Trouba and Ehlers, I still think that they got top 5 talent because other teams mismanage or misrepresent what they're looking for in a player. Whether it be
Philly knows all about that.
Well, and you would, right? So, like, whether it be size and Ehlers, I really don't know what the knock on Trouba was at the time, other than maybe going to Michigan. But, there are things that you can look past if you're willing to. So, yeah, when Anaheim goes up there and takes 230-pound Nick Ritchie, yeah, Cheveldeo should be doing cartwheels because Ehlers is falling into his lap.
I mean, this is a good drafting team. There's only 2 things that drive me nuts about their drafting. One is that they reach for picks, and Just those reaches seem to have worked out, so that's good for them.
Except for Morrissey, he went what 5-6 picks earlier than he should have.
At least probably 10.
The second thing, which kind of ties into the first thing, is that if you are going to reach, they haven't really been able to pull the trigger on trading down and bringing in more picks. And I think if your strength as a team is drafting, get more picks.
Sure, but again, let's look at this in a vacuum. Now, who's to say that at those picks somebody's looking to move up, right? So that's the problem that I always have with, well, why don't you just trade this? Well, what's the market on that? Like, can we set an actual value? Do we actually know that there was a value to move up? Right?
Yeah,
like now, in most places, there probably are. And at the end of the day, is Kevin Cheveldayoff a good tactician of trades? And is he probably good like a Billy Bean or a Ron Hextall type of guy that can schmooze you and make trades despite, you not really wanting to give up that player? Probably not. But he can hang his hat on, loading his cupboard with draft picks and executing on those picks.
So
I don't.
Sorry, just before we go on, I see that Garrett's on here. Do you guys want to try to have Garrett on? Because I can sign off.
No, I can get out of here for sure. I mean, if you guys want to do that, I got a crying baby, so I should.
So here's just what I would want
right
to
next
say.
to you. His name is
TJ, are you more saying that the Jets? So you got, instead of draft and develop, would you say it's more asset management? Would be a word for
at this point, yes, because I don't think if you were going to say draft and develop is what's currently going on, then you would see better talent coming in playing for the Manitoba Moose than Matt Halischuk and Patrice Cormier. They would be going out and getting a Keith O'Coin type player. They would, like 2-3 years ago when they went to the Calder Cup final, they brought in Jerome Sampson, they brought in Andrew Gordon. Those were two proven AHL scorers that could definitely go about helping these guys. And Garrett wrote a great article on it about a week ago. And it's not that they're younger than anybody. Their current age on average fits in with 4 or 5 other teams. I think it was the Marlies, and I forget the other 2 that he had scouted, but it all fit in. It was the fact that their veterans scored squadouche. Andrew McWilliam, squadouche. Patrice Cormier, squadouche. Like, guys aren't doing anything, and it's falling on the Patens, and it's falling on the Lipons, and it's falling on the DeLeos to go and score 0.7 points a game or a full point a game to keep this team even mildly competitive. So, yeah, I would say right now it's more asset management than anything draft and developing, because if they were, they'd be giving these guys good players to play alongside.
Or to my point earlier, if you're a draft and develop team and you tell yourself as these expiring UFAs, you trade them for whatever draft picks you can get. Anybody that signed a contract, your point about Antropov and Wellwood, well taken, but Hainsey and Redmond and these UFAs that sign contracts in next year, especially a Zach Redmond, like a right-handed defenseman that can move the puck, that you didn't have in your plans at all.
And that's probably
even when he was healthy.
And I mean, you're seeing the same thing with Paul Postma right now. That guy's in purgatory. That guy's, probably too good for the AHL, not good enough for the NHL, and he's just in purgatory right now. I mean, he's better than some of the guys that are on this blue line for sure. But somebody somewhere doesn't like him. Somebody somewhere I don't think liked Zach Redmond. And that's why you're seeing these things. Ron Hainsey, what you alluded to, I think that his contract came up at a bad time when, as a rep for the NHLPA, he was getting raked over the coals for the lockout. And then he got a sweetheart deal with Carolina.
What do they call
I don't think anybody wanted to touch him at the time. Because it's a nightmare. Oh, you wanted to trade for a guy that wanted to lock out and wanted more money, blah, 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 blah.
Well, he's worth something. 2.2 million.
That, but I mean,
it's not a.
I get what you're saying, but at the same time, like, what would it have been? Like a 3rd round pick, a 4th round pick? We've already established that those guys aren't doing like that. That the bread and butter has been in the 1st round outside of Hellebuck and a couple guys that we kind of like. But pan out. Here's the other thing: it might not pan out. Like it straight up might not pan out. There were plenty of prospects that were this caliber for other teams. Washington, especially. I remember watching Francois Bouchard, and he looked like a supreme player. 100 points in the queue. Played well with Hershey. Went to Calder finals, and now I don't even know where he is. He's probably in Europe somewhere. So you can't hang your hat on every one guy that looks good, but you just got to hope that you hit more often than you don't.
But then wouldn't you say that being able to flip guys and trying to get something for them instead of nothing is also you're buying yourself more tickets to the lottery, right? So you can use those tickets to, acquire someone that you maybe that has term left on their deal, package it up, maybe bring in a top 6. So to me, it's kind of hard just always drafting your 7 draft picks. If you can flip a guy and getting back to, can't remember who just tweeted it to us in this conversation. Frickin' Zach Ronaldo got a 3rd. So if Zach Ronaldo gets a 3rd, why couldn't Redmond have gotten a 3rd or a 4th, or why couldn't why can't Paul Postma get you a 5th round? It's still something, right? You can still find those players in the 5th round. So that's kind of my take. Is it's just don't let these guys go for nothing if you can get something for them.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but was Redmond not snatched off waivers? He didn't opt to sign somewhere else. He got snatched off waivers and then re-signed there, extended there, correct?
I think so. I think they got him off.
He signed.
So yes, they picked him up when they tried to send him down, and sometimes that'll happen, right? But I don't disagree with that either. I do think that there has to be a market for the players, like you guys have alluded to. There are a couple guys there that were expiring that may have been worth some value somewhere. I think that you owe it to your roster and to your players to at least kick tires. I absolutely agree with that. At least kick tires on an expiring contract. But I think that you're going to see now with some actual bread and butter players coming up that are going to have a home in the NHL going forward, other than Redmond, other than Hainsey, that you're actually going to get some value for these guys. So I'm interested to see. I really hope that at this point they're done with the Andrew Ladd experiment. I hope that come the deadline they're ready to cut bait, because like you guys said, and Billy, I've been reading Moneyball so much lately, and I have to get a Browns plug in here because I bought it to get an idea of what Paul Podesta's head's about. But in reading it, it's really interesting, and essentially what I took away from it was that never be satisfied with the status quo. If you're happy with the status quo, then you're not getting better and you're not winning. So I do think that for a point in time now, they have been okay with the status quo. And I am hoping that, oh God, is that a McCoy? Good God.
I got it for $10 when I went to Cleveland last fall.
We're so sad. Thank you for that. Now I lost my train. Oh yeah, so the status quo. So you got to, at some point you got to cut bait. And I truly believe that this is an Andrew Ladd's team. Dustin Byfuglien's going to be a member on it. One of Little or Wheeler will probably be a member on it. But this is Scheifele's team. This is Trouba's team. This is everybody that's coming up in that age group. It's going to be their team that's going to get this team to the playoffs consistently. I truly believe that.
So here's okay. Let's one more thought. So you said this is one of Wheeler or Little will be here. Do you think one of them gets moved, or do you see one of them getting moved this year, next year? Would you move one of them? What are your guys' thoughts?
If the right deal came around, I'd move one of them. Also, it depends. I believe that Little's deal comes up before Wheeler's deal, so I'd be more susceptible to say that he would be the one moving of the.
Other than the fact that he's a center, though, right? And as a center too, he's worth more currency as well, too, right? So.
Okay, so there's an extra year on Wheeler there, and they're all UFAs. Points. So I think that they're going to have to gauge that, and again, it's probably going to depend a lot on where this team is looking like they're trending in 2 to 3 years. If I'm Brian Little and if I'm Blake Wheeler, and this team is kind of staying where they're at, then I have no loyalty to resign there. But if they're showing market improvement, if they're bringing in young guys to insulate them and allow them to play in more diminished roles as they get into their 30s, then I think that there's a possibility for that too. But Winnipeg's always going to be a market that's looking to be on the thrifty side. So if any of those guys become out of their price range, which Little probably will at that time, then they definitely have to look to cut bait and make some moves to keep replenishing the cupboards, as it were.
Okay, last question for you guys. What's the biggest need for the Jets going into the 2016 draft? I'll start with you, Alan. What do you think is the biggest organizational need for this team?
A superstar. But assuming that you're not, that's not just going to fall into your lap. Let me think about this. I think it depends on, it's going to depend on where they're picking. Right now, I think you're really set at net, which is nice. You don't have to screw around with top picks because, the goalies are voodoo, as you said. So I would say that if you end up tinkering with your defenseman, it's probably another defenseman. To be honest,
I will agree.
I mean, at this point, with the money on the top end that's going to be going to Byfuglien for sure, Myers pretty much for sure, and one of Enstrom or Trouba, if not both of them. You've kind of got a score on a younger defenseman that can come in and fill those bottom roles for cheap. You might have that in Morrissey, but down the road, that's probably, defense is always, a stud defenseman to me is worth more than a stud forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, TJ, what do you think is the biggest need?
So are we talking about from a draft standpoint or in a standpoint overall?
I think an organizational standpoint, what do you feel is the thing that they need the most?
They have to get AHL caliber players in the AHL to help these guys develop, because right now you're just putting too much on the plates of certain young guys like DeLeo and Patan. They're impossible to watch. They're infuriating to watch. They can't break out of their own zone. They can't make simple passes. Their penalty kill stinks. Their power play stinks. They need players there that create a winning culture so that when these guys come up to the next level, they know what it's all about. They know what's expected of them, and they don't have any shitty habits that they're currently developing with Matt Halishchuk and Patrice Cormier skating around out there.
And if you're guys like some of these guys that still like Patan, who could still be a part of the future of the Jets and be a major contributor, this is a really, really crappy start for him as a professional with this organization. Yeah. With him and DeLeo, Comrie's another one. I think Pat Williams tweeted out that someone within the coaching staff of the Moose had to basically sit down with them and tell them it's not all your fault that this is happening. And that's really sad that you even have to be in a position to have that conversation with a player.
Alan, they give up 45 shots on average a game. It's incredible.
They're not even. It's not even that they're bad. They're not even competitive.
No, it's awful. They're getting laughed out of every building they play in.
Yeah, and so pieces of your future right now are experiencing that, and that's I'm with you there. That's very, very concerning.
And what would
all right, gentlemen?
Oh, you got to go.
I got to bid you adieu. Thank you so much.
Still love you, man.
So, Poppy, what do you think is the biggest organizational need going into 2016 draft?
Organizational need. Well, we need to shore up that left side of the defense for sure, right? And get some at least competitive talent on in the bottom six. But honestly, everything goes away when we get somebody with really top flight talent in one of the first 5 picks, right? That alleviates a lot of it. We get somebody that can make an impact right away in the next few years, and the possibilities are limitless. But we need to ensure that we get a top 5 pick, and we need to get somebody for the left side of the defense. And any 6 defensemen, top 6 that includes Mark Stewart is a fail period, right? So may piss or get off the pot with Paul Postma. Either trade him or insert him into the lineup and flip somebody else to the left side. Trouba and Byfuglien weren't horrible as a pairing, right? And Trouba wasn't horrible on the left side of the defense, right?
No.
So whether we make the decision that, hey, yeah, Paul Postma is good enough, and and it's never going to happen, but what I'd like to see is Stewart be the odd man out and be in the press box. But whatever.
Yeah. What do we know, right? We're just a bunch of bums.
What do we know? I just, today was a momentous day. We signed our best player, period.
Yeah.
right?
I mean,
To,
top five day for the franchise, right? You'd think.
absolutely.
So far,
Yeah.
well, the Jets part of the franchise.
One thing that I want to say is, how happy the team was for him, how happy Buff sounded. You know what? If this would have been taken care of in the offseason, this season probably would have played out a little bit differently. I don't know. And then having your captain and your most impactful player, pretty much in limbo for the whole year doesn't help anybody, right? But whatever. I'm just a troll.
I'm giving Chevy a break today. I'll go back to it tomorrow.
Okay.
You did a good job. There's nothing bad I can say about what Chevy did today. So
Yeah.
No, nothing at all. So thanks, guys. Thanks for. So I finished tonight with the least amount of likes. So you guys win. I'm in third. Alan won. No, RB won. RB had about 1,000.
Yeah, but he had to quit. So.
So yeah.
And that was all. That was all from what's his face?
From you.
Yeah.
Whatever, JoJo.
Yeah. So thanks again, guys. We'll try to do this again. Hope maybe Chevy does something tomorrow.
You're catching up to me, and you just beat me.
Yes.
All right, I'm taking.
All right. Talk
Draft
to you guys
into
later.
Great. Thanks, guys.